Waking up to someone in our campsite. In 2019, my partner and I, both early 20s, decided to take a road trip to Vancouver, Canada, and then stay at the Golden Ears Provincial Park. We liked camping, had spring break, and wanted to do something different and make the most out of our vacation. My partner had never been out of the US, and it seemed like a crazy new experience. It was a 6-day trip with Airbnbs in each state, and the grand finale was a reserved campsite at Golden Ears, and it was close to the water, Alouette Lake. We packed terribly, had a giant tent, bought a bunch of fruit and veggies to eat healthy, stored them in a cooler that was way too small, and brought a cutting board and knife to break up the snacks while driving. We started in California and switched off driving a bright red Ford Fiesta. We drove through Oregon and Washington and made it to Vancouver. We spent a day or two in each state, drank a little too much, and stayed out late. Canada was the best part, and Alouette Lake felt like walking in a painting. We walked barefoot on the rocks with our toes in the freezing cold lake. We hiked around, saw a beautiful waterfall where we saw a couple taking pics of each other for an hour, and we started modeling the same poses from far away. Everything was perfect, and the campsite was empty except for the other couple. We went to bed early that night. It was quiet, and I woke up to crackling outside the tent. My partner was still asleep and snoring. I didn't think much of it because it was pitch black and probably an animal. The crackling continued closer to the tent. I sat up and grabbed my phone. The brightness came on and I turned it off, almost blinding myself with the light. In those 2 seconds, I could make out a person right outside our tent. I froze and sat up. They weren't moving and were close enough to unzip the tent. I started poking my partner because I had no idea what to do. They woke up and I said, "There's someone outside the tent." Then I hear footsteps, quiet footsteps walking out of our campsite. My partner starts loudly saying, "What?" repeatedly in a sleepy haze. A car or truck is parked right outside our camping area. No one is near our campsite. It starts up and then drives off. They didn't turn their lights on until they turned the corner, and we were out of view, so I couldn't make out much, but it looked like a truck. And now I'm shaking, and my partner can't put together what's happening. I want to leave, but Golden Ears locks the gates until 6 or 7 a.m., and it's only 1, so we're going to be here for a while. I make us move to the car, and we just sleep inside that, despite it being tightly packed. She falls asleep immediately and thinks I'm paranoid. Could it just have been a park ranger? It seemed too weird of behavior for a park ranger. I sit there wide awake for about 2 hours. The car is locked and I want to sleep, but I can't. I'm in the passenger seat and my partner is in the driver's seat asleep. It's 3 a.m. now. I'm sitting half awake. I hear a car slowly driving up the road, lights off as it rounds the corner. It had to be the same truck, and I was scared, but my adrenaline was pumping. It slowly rounds the corner and pulls up directly in front of our campsite, again in the same spot. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I had no weapon except for the kitchen knife we brought for the fruit and veggies, so I grabbed the knife and tried to make myself look angry, crazy, and big. I sit straight up in the passenger seat, holding the kitchen knife. I keep it straight up at eye level and stare deadpan out at this truck in the pitch black, just like the father in the American Gothic painting. The truck stops and turns off. A light shines directly into my face coming from inside the truck, and I stare back, terrified, holding my large kitchen knife, not blinking. The truck starts up and turns on its lights, and they stay on us, blinding me. And the truck pulls out and turns around and goes back where it came. My heart is pounding, and I wake up my partner and say, "We need to get the hell out." We pack by just throwing things into our car and sit there awake until 6 a.m. We drive home and don't stop. We keep rehashing and trying to make sense of the situation, but we ultimately decide that we both need some sleep. In the middle of the woods. My friends and I decided to go camping one spring break. We had planned a weekend in advance, and as the day got closer, the weather got worse. It was cold and gray, unheard of for Arkansas. The night finally came along with yet another cold front. It was in the 30s, but we had dressed warm and stocked up on whiskey and beer. The plan was to hit up a spot my buddy knew, which was barely accessible with his 4x4. We wanted to really camp, none of those designated sites for families and seniors in RVs. So, we aimed away from civilization, which was only made up by a single stoplight and a couple hundred people, and we drove into the woods. After 30 minutes of bone-rattling dips across dry creek beds and detours around trees, it started to rain. By the time we found camp, it had turned into hail. The spot was marked by an ancient dirt road a few hundred feet long and the rotting carcass of a VW bug. That night was spent passing a bottle around, hoping we'd figure out the tents before we were too drunk. Eventually, we did, and managed to start a fire with diesel. At this point, the hail had stopped. The empty whiskey bottle lay broken in the fire, and we had a decent pile of empties growing. We drank, we played cards, we passed out in our tents. The next morning, I gradually regained consciousness to the sound of something large being dragged past my tent. It was what looked to have once been a station wagon, stripped and rust-covered, dragging the VW with a chain. The bug had been there for so long that the floor had rotted out and roots had tied it to the forest floor. They lay scattered in the wake of the wagon. In it, a woman was driving, with a man beside her and 3 shirtless kids sat in the back where there used to be seats. The man stared out the window, away from us, the entire time. The children had dirt smeared on their faces, which illuminated their glassy 1,000-yard stares. It's the look of crushing poverty, and you've probably only seen it in the pictures. It exists in war-torn countries, the projects in inner cities, and the deep south. She spoke in a deep nicotine and whiskey-soaked drawl. Y'all come from the city to do some camping? Well, reckon that's fine. As long as you ain't doing no drugs. Y'all ain't doing drugs, are you? We weren't. Just drinking then. Hell, I like a drink now and then my damn self. That's fine. That's just fine. Want to know how I knew y'all were here? Seen them black helicopters flying around? Them some boys that work for me. See, this is my land. And they told me, can't be too careful. Figured I best check it on out. She started laughing. Mucus bubbled up to wet her dry cackle. The man stared out at nothing. One of the children put both hands on the window and gazed through us. His mouth hung open, and spit cut a line through the filth on the glass. He was probably 10. Y'all know Bethany? We didn't. Everyone knows old Beth. Y'all go to church? I lied. Good. Ain't got time for those that don't fear God. Why don't you come on to church tomorrow? You can meet Bethany. It's just over that hill up there. Can't miss it. Boy, she'd sure like to meet y'all. They all would. We assured her we would. She drove away into the trees, slowly dragging the VW. As soon as she left, we all looked at each other and started laughing. It was just nerves. There wasn't anything funny about it. We all have the remnants of a primitive warning system for danger. It's been eroded by living safe and civilized, but every once in a while, it goes off and you obey it without a question. Something is wrong. It started before she spoke, when I looked into her eyes. Something is wrong. The kids, the man, her laugh. Something is wrong. Eventually, we did hike up the hill. You could see for a mile. There was nothing. No buildings, no clearings, just forest. We cut our trip short, packed up, and left before noon.